My sister called me on a Tuesday afternoon and told me I was being replaced as her maid of honor. Her new coworker Brittany was more fun, more supportive, more everything I apparently wasn't. The wedding was in 3 weeks. I'd been planning it for 8 months. I told her I understood, that I wanted her to be happy, and that I'd still come as a guest if she wanted. She seemed relieved I wasn't making it difficult. What she didn't know was that every single vendor for her dream wedding had been paid by me through my investment company, and I was about to pull every dollar back before she could even call Brittany to celebrate. Here's what you need to know. I'm 29. My sister Claire is 26. She'd gotten engaged to her boyfriend Marcus last year and immediately started planning this massive wedding. 200 guests, waterfront venue, live band, the works. Problem was, neither she nor Marcus had that kind of money. She worked retail, he was in sales, and they were already drowning in credit card debt. I run a boutique investment firm, do pretty well for myself. When Claire came to me crying about not being able to afford her dream wedding, I offered to help. Not as a gift exactly, but as an investment in family harmony. I paid vendors directly through my business accounts, kept it quiet, let her think she'd gotten amazing deals or that mom and dad were helping more than they actually were. Over 8 months, I'd put in $47,000. Venue, catering, photographer, flowers, band, her dress alterations, everything. Claire thought she was getting bargains and family discounts. Really, she was getting my money and my connections, because I wasn't about to watch my little sister have a courthouse wedding when I could afford to give her something beautiful. But what happened next made my blood run cold. 3 weeks before the wedding, Claire met Brittany at work. Some new manager who loved to party. Always taking Claire out for drinks, acting like her new best friend. Suddenly, I wasn't cool enough anymore. Wasn't fun enough. Was too serious, too boring, too focused on logistics instead of having a good time. Claire started ignoring my calls, canceling our planning meetings, making decisions without telling me. Then came the call. Claire said Brittany had offered to be maid of honor, and she'd accepted. That Brittany really understood her vision for the wedding, was more excited about it than I'd ever been. She actually said that. More excited than the person who'd spent 8 months and $47,000 making her vision possible. Asked if she was sure. She said yes, that this was what she wanted, that she hoped I'd understand. I said I completely understood and wished her the best. She thanked me for being mature about it, said she'd been worried I'd be dramatic. I promised I wouldn't cause any problems. She believed me. That's when everything changed. I hung up the phone and immediately started making calls. First to my accountant, then to my lawyer, then to every single vendor I'd contracted for Claire's wedding. I explained the situation carefully. The person getting married was no longer working with me as the primary contact. I needed to cancel my financial commitments effective immediately. The venue contract was in my company's name with Claire listed as the event contact. I'd structured it that way for tax purposes, never thinking I'd need the protection. I could cancel with 72 hours notice and only lose the initial deposit, which I'd already written off mentally. I canceled. They tried to argue, but the contract was clear. My money, my rules. Same with the caterer, the photographer, the florist, the band. Every single vendor had contracts that listed my company as the paying party and Claire as the beneficiary. I'd been protecting my investment, and now that protection became my weapon. One by one, I pulled every dollar back. Some vendors kept deposits, that was fine. But the bulk of the money, the $47,000 that was supposed to create Claire's dream wedding, was coming back to me. Quick thing, if you're enjoying this, hit subscribe. We post family revenge stories daily, and trust me, some are even crazier than this. Alright, back to the story. The cancellations would take effect at midnight. All the vendors would send confirmation emails. Claire would wake up the next morning to an inbox full of cancellation notices 3 weeks before her wedding, with no idea why it was happening or how to fix it.
I didn't sleep that night.
Part of me felt guilty. This was my sister, my baby sister, who I'd helped raise after Dad died. But the bigger part of me was angry. She'd used me for months, taken my money and my time and my expertise, and then tossed me aside the second someone shinier came along. She'd taken me for granted, And now she'd learned what that actually cost. My phone started ringing at 6 a.m. Claire, hysterical. The venue had canceled. The caterer had canceled. Everything was canceled. She didn't understand what was happening. Was this some kind of mistake? Could I help her figure it out? She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. I let her talk for 5 minutes before I said anything. Then I asked her a simple question. Had she told any of the vendors she'd changed her maid of honor? She said no. What did that have to do with anything? I explained very calmly that I was the one who'd paid for everything. My company, my contracts, my money. And since I was no longer involved in the wedding planning, I'd withdrawn my financial support. Want to know the best part? The silence on the other end of the phone lasted almost 30 seconds. Then the screaming started. How could I do this to her? I was ruining her wedding. I was being vindictive and cruel. This wasn't about the maid of honor thing, was it? Because that was just about wanting someone more fun in the role, nothing personal. I asked her how spending $47,000 on her wedding wasn't personal. She went quiet again. Claire said she didn't know I'd paid for everything. She thought Mom and Dad had helped, that she'd gotten deals, that vendors had given discounts. I asked her if she'd ever wondered why a waterfront venue and a 5-star caterer were suddenly affordable on her retail salary. She started crying again, said she hadn't thought about it, that she'd just been so excited about the wedding. I told her that was the problem. She hadn't thought about it. Hadn't thought about who was making her dreams possible. Hadn't thought about the value of having someone who actually cared enough to invest in her happiness. She'd throw me away for someone who'd known her for 3 weeks, and now she was facing the consequences. Little did she know I had one more card to play. Claire begged me to reinstate everything. Said she'd made a mistake, that she wanted me back as maid of honor, that Brittany didn't matter. I asked if Brittany had $47,000 to resurrect the wedding. She didn't answer. I said that's what I thought, and suggested she ask her new best friend for help since she was so supportive. My mother called an hour later. Claire had told her everything, and Mom was furious with me. How could I sabotage my own sister's wedding? This was cruel and vindictive. I needed to fix this immediately. I asked Mom how much she'd contributed to the wedding. She said about $5,000. I said I'd contributed $47,000 and got fired for it. She went quiet. Dad had left me some money when he died, more than he'd left Claire because I was older and he'd had less when she was born. Mom knew this. She'd always been sensitive about the financial imbalance between us. Now she was realizing I'd been using that money to help Claire, and Claire had thrown it back in my face. 3 days later, karma came knocking harder than I expected. Claire showed up at my apartment. She'd been calling vendors, trying to rebook everything, and discovering what things actually cost without my connections and my money. The venue alone was $65,000 for her date now, because the only availability was through a premium package. The caterer wouldn't even return her calls after the cancellation. She'd found a new photographer, but they wanted $12,000. She was looking at over $100,000 to recreate what I'd given her for $47,000. She couldn't afford it. Neither could Marcus. They'd have to downgrade everything, maybe move the wedding to a community center, cut the guest list in half, forget about the live band, or postpone entirely until they could save more money. She was devastated. The dream wedding was gone, and Brittany certainly wasn't offering to fund the replacement. I asked her what Brittany had said about the situation. Claire admitted Brittany had been weird about it, said it wasn't her problem, that Claire should have been honest with me from the start. Some best friend. When the crisis hit, Brittany disappeared back to being just a coworker. Meanwhile, the sister she'd replaced was the one who'd actually cared enough to invest in her happiness. Claire asked if there was any way I'd reconsider. She'd do anything. She wanted me as maid of honor again, wanted things to go back to how they were. She was sorry for hurting me, sorry for taking me for granted. She finally understood what I'd done for her. Then I found out the truth about why she'd really replaced me. Brittany had told Claire that having a successful sister as maid of honor would overshadow her on her wedding day. That guests would talk about me instead of her, compare her life to mine, make the day about my success instead of her happiness. Brittany had planted these insecurities and then positioned herself as the solution. She'd manipulated Claire into pushing me out, probably hoping to network with our family's wealthy friends at the wedding. Claire admitted this through tears. She'd been jealous of me, insecure about our financial differences, and Brittany had exploited that. She'd made a terrible decision based on her own issues, and now her wedding was ruined.
She was so sorry.
She knew I had no reason to help her anymore, but she was asking anyway. Begging, really. I told her I needed time to think about it. She left my apartment devastated, probably expecting me to say no. Honestly, I wasn't sure what I'd decide. She'd hurt me badly, betrayed me after everything I'd done. But she was still my sister, and she was genuinely remorseful. The question was whether remorse was enough. I couldn't believe what I was seeing when I checked my phone later that day. Brittany had posted on social media about drama at work, not naming Claire but clearly referencing the situation. She'd painted herself as the victim of family drama, someone who'd tried to help a coworker only to get caught in the middle of sister issues. She was already distancing herself, rewriting the narrative. Claire saw it and called me crying. Her new best friend was throwing her under the bus publicly. I made my decision. I called Claire and said I'd reinstate half the wedding budget. $23,000. Enough for a nice wedding, but not the luxury dream she'd originally planned. She'd have to compromise, scale back, make tough choices. Most importantly, she'd have to rebuild all the vendor relationships herself because I wasn't doing the coordination work anymore. Real quick, where are you watching from? Drop your country below. And honestly, would you have gone this far? Let me know. Now, here's where everything exploded even more. Claire agreed immediately. She thanked me over and over, said she'd make this right, that she'd prove she deserved my help. I told her this wasn't about deserving. It was about me choosing to help my sister one more time despite how she'd treated me. But things between us had changed permanently. I'd be at the wedding as a guest, not as maid of honor. That role was done. She accepted. Over the next 3 weeks, Claire worked frantically to put together a scaled-back wedding. She found a smaller venue, hired a DJ instead of a live band, went with a less expensive caterer. The wedding was still nice, just not the extravagant event she'd originally planned. And she did it all herself, with Marcus's help, finally understanding the work that goes into creating these moments. Brittany didn't come to the wedding. Claire uninvited her after the social media incident. Their friendship dissolved as quickly as it had formed. Meanwhile, I attended as a regular guest, watched Claire marry Marcus, and felt oddly at peace with how everything had turned out. She'd learned an expensive lesson about valuing the people who actually show up for you. My mother apologized to me privately. She talked to Claire extensively and understood what I'd done, both the initial generosity and the final response. She said she'd raised me to have boundaries and I'd enforce them when it mattered. Dad would have been proud of that, even if the situation was messy. The family dynamics shifted after that wedding. Claire was more careful with me, more appreciative, more aware of what things cost both financially and emotionally. We rebuilt our relationship slowly, with more honesty about our differences and insecurities. It wasn't the same as before, but it was more real. Plot twist. 2 years later, Claire asked for my help planning her baby shower. She was nervous to ask, afraid I'd say no after what happened. I said yes, but this time we talked openly about budget, about expectations, about both of us being honest when something bothered us. We'd learned from the wedding disaster, and our relationship was stronger because of it. And that's how karma caught up with her. If this satisfied you, smash that like and subscribe for daily family revenge stories. Comment what you think Claire deserved. YouTube's recommending another crazy story next. Check it out. See you there. Sometimes I think about that phone call where Claire replaced me, how confident she'd sounded, how sure that Brittany was the better choice. She learned the hard way that fun friends and real friends aren't always the same people, and that some bridges you burn can be rebuilt, but they'll never look quite the same as they did before.